I'm here with Arun Gandhi. Arun, thank you for inviting me into your house, and it's an honor to be able to talk to you about your life and your grandfather and current life issues, current world issues, I should say. Thank you.
Thank you, and welcome to my home, and glad to be being interviewed by you.
Well, I appreciate that. I do know a little bit about you, Arun. I know that you were born in South Africa, and you were under the Apartheid regime, and you yourself felt racial injustices because of the color of your skin or your nationality. You didn't quite fit in with the blacks or the whites. How was that?
Yeah, it was a very bad, traumatic experience. I mean, it was so full of hate, and that's how the minority white group there was able to control the non-white population by divide and rule. And to divide people, you have to make people hate each other. So they classified 4 groups. One was, of course, the majority was the African people. They were, at that time, I think, numbering about 27, 28 million. Then there were 3 million whites and less than 1 million Indians and about 1.5 million colored people, the mulattoes.
Mm-hmm.
So the 4 groups kind of hated each other and, constantly looked down on them. And this was kind of pyramidical, so the whites were at the top, the coloreds, the mulattoes were the second, the Indians were number 3, and at the bottom of the pyramid were the Africans.
Whose homeland it was in the beginning. That's kind of ironic, huh? Yeah. Arun, you experienced racism yourself at an early age and a lot of rage and anger as a result of it. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, you grow up in that atmosphere, and if you are sensitive, you begin to wonder what's going on. Why do people hate so much, and why can't we just get along with each other? And I guess I'm a little more sensitive than other people, because a lot of my friends who grew up with me at the time, they just kind of fell into the mainstream and didn't bother to even, nothing fazed them. And I think, it's the attitude of people who say, well, if you don't want me to be here, I won't go there. Just accept it. They won't look at the larger picture of justice and injustice. And so, a lot of people just fell into the groove and say, well, the whites don't want us there, we won't go there.
You felt a different way, though. You felt anger.
Yeah, I felt anger because I was beaten up at a very early age, and that's a very humiliating experience, to be beaten up because of the color of your skin. And so I was too young to understand the philosophy and all that, and so I just wanted to vent my rage. And I'm grateful to my parents for having taken me to India and given me the opportunity to be with grandfather. And he taught me about how we should learn to use anger intelligently rather than abuse it.
How did it feel when you were being profiled, so to speak, in South Africa, knowing that your grandfather had been, what he had been through and what he accomplished in India? It must have. Did you have a yearning to be with him or to go there?
Well, I really didn't understand at that age all the things that he was able to achieve and what great things he did and all that. It didn't hit me at that time.
At 12 years old?
I was just 12 years old.
Most kids at 12 years old are probably out hunting snakes, right?
Yeah. So it was only when I got to India and went to live with him It was not that that was the first time I met him. I met him earlier when I was younger, on early trips. But at that age, it doesn't register. You just see him as a grandfather, and he's gone.
So you left South Africa, moved to India. Were you with your parents when you lived with your grandfather, or were they back in South Africa?
They all came to India with me,
Mm-hmm.
and then they left me with grandfather, and they went about to do their work and visit and do whatever they wanted to do.
I'm just trying to imagine, as a 12-year-old boy, I can't really imagine. I don't know if you can put it into words, from leaving South Africa, which was your home, going to India, although you'd been there before, and suddenly being left with this amazing, arguably now one of the greatest historical figures of all time, but at the time he still was a very powerful figure. So you're 12 years old, and you spent almost 2 years with him, right?
Mm.
How was that? I mean,
Well, that was wonderful. I think I enjoyed it very much. I think in many ways those 2 years were a highlight of my life. He was a wonderful grandfather. People don't know how loving and approachable he was, and he wasn't up there on a pedestal.
Was he into playing games with you, or were you always being in an adult world in that way?
No, he would sometimes, playing games means he wouldn't go out and play soccer or kick the ball around or anything, but he would be very fun. He had a sense of humor, and when we sat and talked and cracked jokes and that kind of thing.
Does anything come to mind, some of the things that he taught you that you could share with us right now?
Yeah, I think the two most important lessons that he taught me were, first of all, about anger and how to use it intelligently rather than abuse it. And I think it's important. I learned about the importance of that as I grew up and realized that so much of the violence that we experience in our lives is generated by anger. We get angry and we blow up and we say things and do things that we regret later on, and then we either have to say sorry, or we break a relationship and live with that, or worse still, we go into prison for some stupid thing that we did. Anger is a good thing. It has, every day you feel anger about something or the other. What you need to learn is to use that energy intelligently rather than abusing it. So learning about anger doesn't mean you stop it and put a lid over it.
So how? Give me an example, if you can, of how one can feel the anger, not react in a negative way.
Well, I mean, like, we're all angry with Trump and what he's doing to the country and all that, but
Many of us are.
Yeah. I think in their hearts a lot of the Republicans too are angry.
Probably. Yeah.
They're in such a mess that they can't find another way out of this. But, I mean, a lot of us are angry about that, and going out and like what's happening now with the protests and the violence that goes on. If they had learned the techniques, then it wouldn't be so difficult. But the unfortunate thing, and I think that's where the second lesson comes into play. And the second lesson that he taught me was the only way you can understand nonviolence is by first understanding the violence and the extent of violence we commit. Because today when I speak to somebody about violence and I ask them, what picture comes into your mind, and they immediately say fighting and killing and all of these physical manifestations of violence. Nobody ever talks about all the passive violence, the discrimination, the way we treat people, the way we look down on people. We don't use any physical violence there, but we still hurt people. Like what's happening with the African Americans right now. We don't always use physical violence against them, but we still hurt them all the time by the way we look down on them. So that is the definition he told me, that there's physical violence and there's passive violence. And the only way we can understand how we are committing passive violence is by doing introspection, to find out how our actions are hurting other people. Like he made me do, have a diary, or I was a kid, so he put a paper on the wall and made me do it on the wall. But you can find your own way of analyzing everything that you've experienced during the day, and say, where would this classify into? Will it go into physical violence, or will it go into passive violence? And when you start doing that and analyzing everything that you experienced and what you did, then you will see how passive violence is so insidious and has gotten so much into our way of life that sometimes we do it without even knowing that we are doing it.
Of course.
I don't know, I may be wrong and some people may disagree with me, but I think at the root of our problems today is materialism. And there's a very beautiful quote from my grandfather who said, materialism and morality have an inverse relationship. When one increases, the other decreases. So the more materialistic we become, the less moral we are. And we can see that in our life every day.
What do you think is the root of violence? Is it based in materialism?
It is based in materialism because, materialism makes us greedy, and materialism means we measure success through material yardsticks. It's become so much a part of our life that even our parenting, when we bring up our children, we are telling our children to be successful in life and think about yourself, don't think about other people. You have to get to the top and work your way up to the top. And so we are planting the seeds of selfishness right from childhood, and making kids believe that they have to get to the top and by any means possible, and don't think about other people, just think about your own. And what is the measure of success? Ultimately is how much is your salary, how much is your income, what kind of car do you drive, what kind of a house you live in. That is the measure of success. So materialism has gotten into our lives and corrupted our lives. It's made us greedy, selfish, self-centered. It's brought out all the worst aspects in our life. And to be able to live with that, we have to just continue to get deeper and deeper into that mire. And that's where all the violence begins there.
Let me go back to India for a second. You were with your grandfather for almost 2 years. You were, at this point, a young teenager. You just left 2 weeks earlier and he was assassinated. How vulnerable did you feel? And how, I can't even imagine how you must have felt as a young teenager, knowing that your grandfather, who was probably the rock of Gibraltar to you, the biggest thing in your life, maybe next to your parents, but a huge figure in the world suddenly is shot. Did you feel fear for your own life? Did you feel devastated?
I didn't feel fear so much as I was in shock. The first reaction was absolute shock. I just couldn't imagine anybody wanting to kill him for any reason, because he was the epitome of love.
Yeah.
And respect, and you don't destroy such a entity. So that shock was so intense that was, I don't know how long it was. I was quite dumbstruck. Couldn't say anything, couldn't think and do anything, until it hit me, and then I reacted with anger. And I told my parents that I wish I was there. I would have throttled the person who did this to him. And then they reminded me, they said, don't forget the lesson your grandfather taught you.
Wow. Wow.
He wouldn't expect that kind of reaction from you, but rather he would expect you to devote your life to ensuring that this kind of stupid violence doesn't take place anymore. And I think that was the turning point in my life when I decided that I was going to do what I'm doing now, to go and spread the word of peace and non-violence.
Well, you've been doing an excellent job of it. You've been traveling for how many years now? Just doing the lectures and books and...
It's been a long, long time.
You never run out of material, do you? Your grandfather was also an environmentalist. He taught you some lessons about conservation, correct?
Yeah, he was. He had his mind going in all different directions, and many of his colleagues, leaders of the Congress Party, he used to be annoyed with him. Why are you dissipating the people's energy in all these different directions when our first goal is to get independence? Then everything else will take care of itself. And he said, no, things, political independence will not ensure economic independence, and will not eliminate poverty. We have to do it now at the same time. So he was quite conscious of all these things, saving the environment, saving waste, our wasteful habits that we have imbibed, just keep buying and wasting and buying and wasting and throwing away.
Do you feel like with the climate change issues that are going on right now that seem pretty bleak because we're not moving very fast? In fact, I just heard today that the government's not allocating any money toward renewable energy on this new budget that they're putting together.
And the present administration budget, they are only one-track mind. They want to make more money.
Make more money, right. Do you feel like the human experiment as a whole could potentially fail as a result of none other than climate change? I mean, is that one of the biggest threats that we experience right now, or is there more of an imminent threat just from how we're treating each other and how divided we are?
Well, everything is a threat, but some things are going to hit us hard and some things not so hard. Our relationships with each other, they are very bad, and they are going to affect us in many different ways. But they won't hit us as badly as the pandemic hit us. I mean, imagine a little virus that you can't even see with your eyes brought the whole world down on its knees. in a matter of moments, not even waiting for a year or 2 years. It happened in a matter of weeks. The whole world came down on its knees, and we can't get up still.
Do you feel like collectively our immune systems are not as strong as they should be in order to be able to fend off things like this because of the poor...
No, I mean, we have created an environment where these new diseases keep coming, and they also, like, humans' arms race. We have to keep escalating the arms race and keep manufacturing new weapons and all that to be stronger than the other. In the same way, the viruses also keep multiplying and growing and becoming stronger. And because of the drugs, because of the environment that we are creating, because of the things that we are putting into the earth, it's all of these things adding up. And these are the kinds of enemies that you can't see. And when they hit you, you won't even know where it came from. I mean, the pandemic should open our eyes to that.
Yes.
We didn't know, and they hit us so bad that we are still stunned by it. Now, this is, scientists say this is just the first part of it. There are more viruses in the works coming up, and they're going to be worse than this one. The moment things seem to improve a little, everybody's talking back to going back into the same way of life. Start the economy, we got to build the economy, get rich again, and do all the things that we did. Now, this was an ideal time for us to stop and think about where we are going and what we are doing and what's our life going to come to. If a small unseen virus can destroy us, then. But we are not doing that. We are not even talking about that. The only one who I have heard talk among the politicians is Cuomo. When he said we can't go back to the normal, there's no the same normal.
Yeah.
We have to think of something else. But he has his limitations, as all of us. But, we are so bound by that security of having money and possessions that we just want to go back to that security. We don't want to think of anything new. So we are going to slip back into the same thing. We are going to make more money and waste more money and destroy more of the environment to make money. And
we can always go to Mars, as Elon Musk wants to do.
Yeah, we made a mess of the Earth, and we're going to make a mess of the
go to another planet. The First Amendment gives us all the right to say anything we want to say. But because of social media and because of the ability to communicate with the world instantaneously, a lot of people abuse that. Do you feel like First Amendment rights should be protected under all circumstances?
I think we have misunderstood the Constitution, and we focus so much on our rights and the freedom and the right to say whatever we want to. But we forget the fact that rights and responsibilities are two sides of the same coin. If you want to really enjoy the rights, you have to be responsible also. You can't be irresponsible and expect to enjoy the rights. And people just talk about rights. We are always talking about rights. We even have a Charter of Human Rights. Why don't we have a Charter of Human Responsibilities along with it? And why don't we talk about our responsibility? The
responsibility to be ethical, to tell the truth, things like that.
Responsibilities in every way. I mean, we have built this nation on the myth that we are independent individuals. And everybody keeps telling us that you are independent and you do whatever you want to do, and freedom to do whatever you like. And nobody is independent. We are all interdependent and interconnected, not only as human beings but along with nature. Now, we can't live on our own if the rest of the world is going down the drain. If your whole neighborhood is going into pot, you can't live here in isolation and say, I'm safe and fine. Everything is going to affect you in every way. So we have to, the same thing applies to nations. Now, we have been taught this myth that we can protect our nation, the security and stability of our nation, if we have a strong army and all the weapons, and nobody can mess around with us and all. So we build a whole big army and weapons and everything there. And we may, in a fight with other nations, we may be able to protect ourselves. But if the rest of the world is going down the tube because of the environment or ecology, or because of the infighting going on among them, then we are not going to be safe in this place.
No.
We are going down with them. So the security and stability of any nation depends ultimately on the security and stability of the world. Now, if we can't ensure the security and stability of the world, if we can't, and that means that, we have to be openly conscious of our responsibility towards creating a world where everybody could live in security and stability. We don't care about that. We only care about where we are getting our raw material from and whom can we exploit to enrich ourselves. That's our only relationship with the rest of the world. And if that nation can't provide anything for us, who cares about its existence? Let them go to pot.
How much does religion play into this? Do you think that fundamentalist viewpoints of any religion?
Well, the trouble with religion is that the scriptures are so ambiguous that everybody can translate it to mean whatever they want.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then everybody misuses it. Even the so-called priests and people who are supposed to interpret and guide us in religious practice, they themselves misinterpret it and give us a wrong thing, because they have ultimate objective then. They want to ensure their position. They want to ensure that their church or temple or synagogue is rich enough to support themselves. So and that again brings in the whole materialism thing. So it corrupts everything then.
Yeah.
We think that going to church every Sunday or going to a temple every day and praying, and we can go and we can say prayers for hours together there, but if those prayers are not translated in your life, they are meaningless.
Yeah. Absolutely.
If you don't live it, they are meaningless. And if you live it, if you live what your religion wants you to, then you don't have to go to a temple or a church to pray there. The trouble with us is we have been taught to look for God outside us. Somewhere out there, God is sitting in heaven judging you and all. God is inside each one of us. We need to look inwards, not outwards, for God.
Very well put. Very well put. It's almost like people make God into their image as opposed to
Exactly.
the opposite. When I do feel like I need inspiration, I look to leaders that have been usually from the past, some present, I suppose, but your grandfather was one of them, and it's an honor to be here in your house and to look at your grandfather and your grandmother right behind you there, and there's a picture of you were with your grandfather when you were 12 years old, probably, right?
No, that picture is earlier when I was
Earlier.
about 5 or 6 years old.
Oh, okay. Well, it's really great to talk with you, Arun. I really appreciate you inviting me into your home and taking part in an important dialogue.
Thank you.